The city buzzed beyond the glass walls of my loft, a relentless hum that followed me all day from the law firm, phones ringing, contracts rustling, the sharp clack of heels on tile. By the time I pushed through the heavy door of my building's lobby, exhaustion clung to me like damp air after the rain that had swept through earlier. My footsteps echoed on the polished concrete, a steady beat against the distant wail of sirens and the low growl of traffic. I craved the quiet of my sanctuary, the one place where the world's noise couldn't reach me. Inside, the loft welcomed me with its familiar scent, cedarwood from the candle I'd lit last night, mingling with the faint, earthy tang of rain-soaked streets seeping through an open window. I dropped my bag on the entry table, its sleek wood surface reflecting the soft glow of a single lamp. The space was my design: clean lines, muted grays, a leather couch angled toward floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the skyline like a painting. It was a haven I'd carved out after my husband's death, a loss that still lingered in the air, marked each year with a private ritual. Just last week, I'd sat alone with a glass of whiskey, watching the flame flicker, letting the ache settle in my chest. Mason, my stepson, shared this place with me. He'd been a lanky teenager when I took him in, and now, at 22, he was a college senior, tall, quiet, with his father's sharp jaw and thoughtful eyes. We'd learned to navigate the emptiness together, filling it with routines, my late nights at the firm, his hours buried in textbooks. The loft held traces of his father, framed photos on the shelves, a worn guitar in the corner, but we rarely spoke of him. It was easier that way. I kicked off my heels, the cool hardwood soothing my aching feet as I padded toward the kitchen. The plush rug in the living room brushed against my toes, and I expected silence. Maybe the faint hum of Mason's music if he were home. He'd texted earlier about a study group, so I figured he'd be out, nose deep in some philosophy text at the library. But as I rounded the corner, a flicker of light stopped me cold. The TV glowed in the dimness, casting shadows across the room. Mason sat on the couch, his broad shoulders hunched, the remote dangling loosely in his hand. His face was turned toward the screen, and I followed his gaze, my breath caught in my throat. There, frozen in time, was me, years younger, hair spilling over my shoulders, a silk robe slipping off one arm as I swayed to soft music. The image was sharp, intimate, a moment I'd captured for my husband alone, a secret I'd buried deep in a digital vault after he was gone. "Mason," I said, my voice cutting through the stillness, steady despite the jolt racing through me. He flinched, head snapping toward me, eyes wide with something between panic and guilt. The remote clattered onto the coffee table, a dull thud against the glass. "Grace, I didn't mean to," he stammered, his hands fumbling as if he could erase what he'd seen. "I was syncing my laptop to the cloud storage and it just came up. I swear I didn't know what it was at first." I stood there, rooted, the city's distant pulse thudding in my ears. My heart kicked against my ribs, a wild rhythm I hadn't felt in years. The woman on the screen stared back at me, unburdened, alive, her movements slow and deliberate, a private dance meant for one man's eyes. Now Mason had seen it too. The air thickened, heavy with embarrassment, and something sharper, something I couldn't name. "What are you doing with that?" I asked, stepping closer, my bare feet silent on the rug. He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. "I clicked it by accident," he said, his voice low, almost a plea. I stopped as soon as I realized it was you. "I'm sorry, Grace. I didn't mean to dig into this." I studied him, his flushed cheeks, the way his fingers gripped the edge of the couch. He looked like a kid caught sneaking cookies, but there was more in his eyes, a flicker of curiosity he couldn't hide. My mind spun, a tangle of hurt and confusion, laced with an unsettling awareness of how exposed I felt. That video was mine, ours, my husband's and mine, a piece of a past I'd locked away. Now it hung between us, a ghost in the room. "I need a minute," I said finally, turning toward the hallway. My steps were measured, deliberate, the click of my resolve louder than the city outside. We'll talk about this later. I didn't wait for his reply. The loft's walls closed in as I walked, the cedarwood scent fading into the hum of my own thoughts. I had to get away, to breathe, to figure out what this meant, for me, for him, for the fragile world we'd built here. The hallway stretched before me like a tunnel, each step a quiet thud against the hardwood as I left Mason and that glowing screen behind. My pulse still raced, a frantic drumbeat echoing the shock of seeing myself laid bare, not just to my stepson, but to the ghosts of a life I'd tucked away. I turned into the living room again after a breath, the city's amber light spilling through the windows, painting the leather couch in soft streaks. Mason hadn't moved. He sat there, hands clasped tight, staring at the coffee table as if it held answers I couldn't see. "Mason," I said, my voice cutting the silence like a blade, calm but firm, honed by years of courtroom battles. He looked up, his eyes catching mine. Those hazel eyes so like his father's, wide with guilt, and something else I couldn't place. "Grace, I'm so sorry," he started, words tumbling out fast. "I was syncing files to the cloud for a project, and it popped up in the shared folder. I didn't know what it was. I clicked it, and then I stopped. I swear I didn't watch more than a few seconds." I crossed my arms, the silk of my blouse cool against my skin, and leaned against the armrest of the chair across from him. The air buzzed with tension, thick as the humidity after the rain. "That was private," I said, each word deliberate, heavy. "It was for your father, Mason. Only him. You weren't supposed to see it. Nobody was." My chest tightened as I spoke, the weight of those memories pressing down, the intimacy of that silk robe and soft music now tainted by his gaze. He nodded, quick and jerky, his fingers digging into his palms. "I get it, Grace. I shouldn't have clicked. I didn't mean to invade that part of you." His voice cracked, and he glanced away toward the dark TV screen, now blank but still looming like a witness. "I'll delete it, right now if you want. It won't happen again." I watched him, my attorney's eye picking apart his posture, the slump of his shoulders, the flush creeping up his neck. He meant it, I could tell, but there was something beneath his apology, a flicker in his stare when he'd looked at me, like he'd glimpsed a stranger in the woman who'd raised him. My mind churned, a storm of hurt and confusion swirling with an odd heat I didn't want to name. Those videos were my secret, a thread to a man whose laughter once bounced off these walls, whose touch once lit me up. Now Mason had brushed against that thread, and it felt like the whole tapestry might unravel. "Delete it," I said, nodding curtly, my tone clipped as I straightened up. "And we'll talk more about this later. I need to process all of this." I didn't wait for him to respond. Wait for him. I turned on my heel, the rug's softness giving way to the cool hardwood again as I headed down the hall. My bedroom door clicked shut behind me, a soft barrier between me and the chaos I'd left in the living room. I leaned back against the wood, exhaling a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. The city sprawled beyond my window, a sea of twinkling lights against the dusk, each one a pulse of life moving on while I stood still. My heart slowed, the frantic beat easing into something steadier, but my hands trembled as I brushed them over my face. Mason's words echoed. I didn't mean to, and I believed him, but that didn't erase the image of him sitting there, eyes locked on a version of me I'd buried. A version who danced in silk, who laughed low and free, who loved without fear. The loft was quiet now, save for the faint hum of traffic far below. I glanced at the sage-green walls, the neatly made bed, the single photo on the nightstand. Me and his father, smiling under a summer sky. That video wasn't just a file. It was a piece of us, a fragile bridge to a time when I felt whole. And now Mason had crossed it, accidentally or not. I sank onto the edge of the bed, the mattress dipping under me, and stared at the skyline. The shock was fading, replaced by a creeping nostalgia, a longing for that woman on the screen, and a question I couldn't shake. What had Mason seen when he looked at her? At me? The bedroom wrapped around me like a cocoon, the sage-green walls dim in the fading light, the city's glow seeping through the window in soft golden threads. I sat on the edge of the bed, my hands resting on the crisp white duvet, the stillness so thick I could hear my own breathing. Slow, deliberate, like I was trying to anchor myself. The loft felt smaller tonight, the air heavy with what had happened, and I needed to be alone, to sift through the mess in my head. I kicked off my stockings, letting my bare feet sink into the rug, and reached for my phone on the nightstand. Its sleek weight felt like a lifeline as I swiped it open, my thumb hovering over a locked folder I hadn't touched in months. I typed in the passcode, his birthday, a number etched into me, and there they were. Thumbnails of a past I'd sealed away. Videos I'd made for my husband, little capsules of us when love was a fire nothing could douse, not even the illness that stole him. I hesitated, then tapped the one Mason had seen. The screen flared to life, and there I was, younger, lighter, the silk robe slipping over my shoulders as I swayed to a jazz tune, the notes low and sultry. My hair fell in loose waves, catching the candlelight from that old apartment, and I smiled at the camera. A secret curve of my lips meant only for him. I watched, my breath hitching as the memory flooded back. The robe slid down my arms, pooling at my feet, leaving me in a lace camisole that hugged my skin, tracing the lines of my body with a quiet daring. My movements were slow, a dance of shadow and light, the arch of my spine, the soft rise of my chest, the way my fingers brushed my neck as if inviting his touch from beyond the lens. His voice, faint and warm, chuckled off-screen, a sound that twisted my heart even now. Each frame was a love letter, a moment when I'd felt alive, desired, whole. The phone trembled in my hands as I let it play, my eyes tracing the woman I'd been. In another clip, I laughed, tossing my head back, teasing him with a playful spin that sent the camisole's hem fluttering. In the next, my brow furrowed, lips parted in a silent plea as I moved closer to the camera, my gaze locked on the man who knew me best. The videos weren't just about the physical. They were us, our bond, a defiance against the shadow creeping closer. I'd made them in those last months, when his strength was fading, a way to hold him even when his hands couldn't hold me back. I paused the screen, my thumb hovering over that frozen image. Me, mid-step, eyes bright with mischief. Shame prickled my skin, sharp and hot, knowing Mason had seen this. He'd glimpsed a part of me I'd locked away, a part I'd raised him never to know. I'd been his rock, his steady grace, not this woman who danced and bared herself without fear. But beneath the shame, something else flickered, a quiet pride, a whisper of longing for that version of me. She was bold, unapologetic, a flame I'd let dim under the weight of grief and duty. I set the phone down and stood, crossing to the window. The city stretched out below, a patchwork of lights blinking like stars, each one a life pulsing forward while I lingered here, caught between then and now. My reflection stared back from the glass, older, sharper, but still carrying her shadow. What had Mason seen in that video? A stranger? A ghost? Or something more? A piece of me he'd never known? A piece tied to the father he barely remembered? My fingers pressed against the cool pane, and I exhaled, the breath fogging briefly before fading. The loft was silent, but my mind roared with questions I wasn't ready to answer, echoes of a past I couldn't outrun. The next evening, the loft glowed with the soft hues of sunset, amber and rose bleeding across the skyline, casting long shadows over the hardwood. I'd spent the day in a haze of depositions and deadlines, the firm's glass-walled offices a blur of motion. But now time slowed, each tick of the clock pulling me toward this moment. The air felt charged, thick with the weight of what lingered between Mason and me. I'd tossed all night, those videos replaying behind my eyes, my laughter, my bare skin, his father's voice, and I knew we couldn't leave it unspoken. It was an elephant in the room, too big to ignore, and I had to face it. I stepped into the living room, my heels clicking faintly before I slipped them off, the rug swallowing the sound. Mason was already there, perched on the edge of the couch, his hands clasped tight in his lap. He looked up as I entered, his hazel eyes catching the fading light, guilt etched into the lines of his face. But something else, too, a spark of defiance or curiosity that made my stomach twist. The TV sat dark, a silent witness to last night, and the city hummed beyond the windows, a steady pulse against the tension coiling inside these walls. "Mason," I said, settling into the chair across from him, my posture straight, my voice steady like I was addressing a jury. "We need to talk about what happened. It's important we're honest." He nodded, a quick jerk of his head, his gaze dropping to his hands before flicking back to me. "I know, Grace," he said, his voice low, rough around the edges. "I'm sorry, really. I didn't mean to dig into your privacy like that. It was an accident, and I feel awful." I leaned forward, elbows resting on my knees, the silk of my skirt rustling softly. "It's more than privacy, Mason," I said, my words measured, cutting through the air. "Those videos, they're personal. They were for your father, a part of my life I never planned to share. Not with you, not with anyone." My chest tightened as I spoke, the memory of that silk robe and jazz tune flashing behind my eyes, now tangled with the image of Mason staring at it, his face flushed, and he shifted, the couch creaking under him. "I get that," he said, meeting my gaze this time, his tone earnest but shaky. "I swear I didn't watch much, just enough to realize what it was. But I can't lie, Grace. You were radiant. It's like I saw a side of you, of Dad, I never knew. There's a part of me that wants to understand that, to feel closer to him through you." His words hit me like a gust of wind, unexpected and raw, stirring a mix of shock and something deeper, something I didn't want to name. Part of me recoiled, appalled by the implication. But another part, buried under years of control, flickered with intrigue at his honesty, his need. The silence stretched, electric, crackling between us. I knew the smart move. Shut it down, reinforce the line he'd crossed, keep this clean and safe. But as I looked at him, I saw more than the boy I'd raised. I saw a man grasping for a father he'd lost too young, a man who'd glimpsed me, not just as Grace, but as a woman his father had loved fiercely. My heart pounded, a wild rhythm against my ribs, and I took a deep breath, stepping onto a ledge I wasn't sure I could balance on. "All right," I heard myself say, the words foreign, heavy on my tongue. "One video, together, tomorrow night, but this isn't about curiosity or anything else. It's about honoring him, about finding a way through this without losing what we've built." Mason's face softened, a cautious hope spreading across it, and he nodded. "I promise, Grace. This means more to me than you know." I stood, smoothing my skirt, my decision hardening with each breath. "We'll set rules," I said, my voice firm again. "This stays here, between us. No one else can know. Ever." He agreed fast, his eyes steady on mine. "Of course, I won't tell a soul." The terms hung there, a fragile pact, and I felt a strange calm settle over me, a calm laced with dread and a whisper of thrill. Tomorrow would shift something. I knew it, but I'd made my choice. As I turned toward my room, the city lights winked like they were in on the secret, and I wondered what I'd just set in motion. "Say,"